How can you check if your deck's competitive? Keep watching and find out. Alright, I'm gonna try to do this in one take. Whenever I check if my deck's competitive, I always check these 10 things. Number 1, can my Pokemon handle their own weaknesses? Number 2, what do I do if my Pokemon sleep or poison? Number 3, can I control the stadium in case my opponent's using a dangerous stadium? Number 4, how well can I keep the cards flowing through my hand? Number 5, are my Pokemon strong enough? And number 6 is, can I charge those Pokemon quick enough? 7 through 10 are meta-defining Pokemons, which we'll get to. Let's start with number 1, which is weakness. Now, weakness is dangerous because when your Pokemon is taking double damage due to fighting their weakness, they can be easily knocked out, giving your opponent's prize cards a little bit too easily. Not gonna fight them all the time, but maybe you should have a plan on how to handle it. And for example, the deck that I showed you guys last week, fighting deck, my budget fighting deck, I know, don't get me on that. Lucario is weak to Psychic as well as Machamp. So whenever I'm going against Psychic, it's a little rough. In that case, I will try to hang on to Landorus or Miltank, who are not weak to Psychic, to try to do more of the heavy lifting. If not, I can still use Lucario to fight, but at least I have some way of managing my weakness just a little. Now, there are other ways, there are other Pokemon abilities or items to handle it, but they require additional deck space, and this is just the most natural way to handle your weakness. Now, let's move on to number 2. Status conditions, sleep, and poison. How to deal with those? Well, easiest way is just to retreat your Pokemon, and if your Pokemon has 2 or less retreat costs, it's not a big deal. So my Pokemon do have 2 retreat costs as the most expensive. I'm okay with just paying the retreat costs because then I can just lose Landorus and get those energy cards back into my bench Pokemon. Now, when you're dealing with things like sleep, maybe and quite often you should bring Switch or Escape Ropes. Those trainers bring your Pokemon back into the bench, regardless if they're asleep or not. So it's a nice way to handle those status effects. Now, a lot of other cards too can do it. Just gonna talk about these 2 to keep the video a little bit short. Alright, number 3 is Stadium Control. Stadiums are dangerous depending on if your opponent is using, well, like Beer Bank City. I don't have that card, but intensifies poison to a degree where it can easily knock out Pokemons within few turns, so it's extremely dangerous. Another one, for example, is Dimensional Valley. Now, there's a very fast, Dimensional, it's a trainer card. If there's a very fast Psychic deck, this card is dangerous because all the Psychic Pokemons are just going to charge up very quickly and use their most powerful attack way too fast in a manner that you cannot control. So you must have your own stadium cards to deny them. And in this case, I'm using Fighting Stadiums and I'm using Scorch Earth Stadiums, 2 of each for a total of 4. So whenever my opponent plays a stadium that I don't like, I can try to fight back and get rid of it. So Stadium Control is the 3rd one. Number 4 is Card Flow. You cannot have a very small hand all the time. If you're feeling like you're stuck and you can't draw any cards, you have to change your deck composition. If you have low cards, the easiest way to solve that problem is to use more draw support trainers such as Juniper, or N, or Corna, and as well as, this is Corna right here, and these are Burst Seekers, which allows me to play those draw trainers again. So if you're ever stuck on cards, think about putting more support trainers into your deck. It may help, and when you're not getting the right cards, adjust the composition of deck, and that's called fine tuning. Now, number 5 and number 6 are very linked together. It's about how much damage you can do and how fast can you charge up your Pokemon. And this is related in that it's based around Pokemon EX. 90 is able to knock out most EX Pokemons in 2 shots, which is why it's a magic number, and some Pokemons need like 130 hit points to completely knock it out, such as Landorus. That's why they're magic numbers. Now, you need to have Pokemon to be able to hit those that high. And for this deck, I have 20 damage added through many different ways. For one, I could use my Champ to boost my Pokemon's damage. Two, I could use Muscle Band to add 20 more damage. Or the Fighting Stadium, or even, finally, the Fighting Energy, and even all those together can add up to 90 on top of my Pokemon's regular attacks. Now, many different decks have ways of achieving 90 damage because, well, they might just have an attack that just hit for 90. Alright, so that's why 90 damage and 130 damage is so critical. Now, what about charging them up? Now, normally, in order to get my 100 damage attack, I have to use 3 energies. And because both EX Pokemon should last 2 turns, because I told you 90 is pretty common nowadays, you should charge your next Pokemon within 2 turns, which is usually done through some form of energy acceleration. And I do that through Landorus, who can help charge up my bench, but I can also achieve 90 damage through many different ways, so it's not a big deal in charging up my Pokemon, such as Miltank only needs 1 energy and just a Muscle Band, and she can do 90 damage. So that applies to many other different decks. Now, some decks may use like double colorless energy, which is another way to charge up your Pokemon faster, or Crobats, Hypnotoxic Lasers to achieve those magic numbers without having to do some form of energy accelerations. And there are so many forms of energy accelerations I can't talk about it all. Now, we need to talk about meta-defining Pokemons. And the first one is the Safeguard, which I'm going to bring up Sigilif. Safeguard is where your Pokemon cannot, or your EX Pokemon cannot break through this Pokemon power. Can't damage it at all, nothing happens to it. How do you deal with it? Easy. Don't use an EX Pokemon, make sure you have some reliable source of damage that's not from the EX. Now, this deck already runs plenty of Machamp, it runs Landorus, it runs Miltank, it has no problem at all because EX Pokemons are, well, I technically only have 3 EX cards, so I'm okay. But there are certain decks out there that run 2 EX heavy and you may just have to forfeit when this thing comes out. Now, the next one we're going to talk about is Pyroar. And Pyroar, oh, I have a copy, let me bring it up. Pyroar. P-I-R-O-R. Now, Pyroar is a bit different in that it denies basic Pokemons, including Pokemon EX, including basic Pokemons that you normally use to go through things like Sigilif. Like in another deck, I might have used, well, Landorus to try to go through the Sigilif, but now I can't. So how do I deal with it? I have to use Evolve Pokemon, and not just having one Evolve Pokemon, usually having a whole entire set helps a lot. And in that case, I have 4 Machamps. That's not going to be a problem for me, and Machamp will pretty much one-shot this Pyroar as well as Mega Lucario. So, Pyroar is just fine. What about now Seismitoad? Seismitoad is dangerous because you cannot play any items at all. It does have a, well, actually playing against Seismitoad, you will know you might be stuck if your deck composition is too heavy dependent, especially if you needed to bring Pokemon and cards out from your deck. So you can alter your composition to use more support cards, or the best way to deal with it is just use it the old-fashioned way. Have strong EX Pokemons that can charge up with energies quite efficiently, and just take it out, because Quaking Punch only does 30 damage. I mean, it does slow your deck down, but it's weak. Just take out your Mega Lucario, just take out your Lucario, or whatever EX Pokemon, just charge it up, and it pretty much Seismitoad may lose the fight, and this works kind of, maybe. It works. It's probably the best way to deal with Seismitoad, as well as changing your deck composition. Now, next one, we've talked about Sigilif, Pyroar, Seismitoad. How about Garbodor? Garbodor is only dangerous if you're using Pokemon powers, which I'm using Fighting Fury. I don't depend on Fighting Fury too often, but it does help my damage a lot, so I do need to get rid of that Garbodor. Now, most people say that you're supposed to go, I'm gonna open trainer and bring it up. I need, what card removes it? It is called Starling Megaphone, that's it. Starling Megaphone removes items from your opponent's Pokemon, and how this helps is when your opponent plays a Garbotoxin, if it's holding an item, no Pokemon power works whatsoever. So just use your Starling Megaphone, and it gets rid of it, but it's only a temporary fix. You need to really get rid of it permanently. But it only has 100 hit points, and I would just recommend playing plenty of Lysanders, drag it out, one-shot it, boom, it's gone. And most decks, they just don't run very thick Garbodor lines. This Garbodor does nothing if your opponent's not using Pokemon powers. So, those are the 10 things that I make sure my deck goes against. Am I missing anything? No, it's just Q2 today. Yeah. Hello. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't. It helps me make more videos. If you need to see my fighting deck, I have the link right down there. If you like the music and want to download it, I have the link right down there too. I keep going with it. And next week, it's going to be about Mega Gardevoir deck. I promised I was going to talk about it long ago in one of my earliest videos. I'm going to do it next week. And I will see you next time. Maybe. Hopefully.